Today's ride is on Highway 288. This is in the Tonto National Forest, east of the Phoenix, Arizona area. I was sleeping last night at the Sawmill Flats campsite. It's a dispersed campsite area, but it's kind of cool. They actually have fire pits and everything, but it's free. So you get a fire pit, you get a picnic table, a nice spot. It looks like a regular campsite, not normal dispersed, which is just, a barren area where you can set yourself up for the night. Now this looked like a regular campsite, but it was free. Awesome. Anyway, came out of there, ended up back on paved roads, though just barely. And I got these sights, and you're just driving down the mountain roads, and oh my goodness, look at those views, eh? So Sawmill Flats, it was an area where they took all the wood that they used to build the Roosevelt Dam. The Roosevelt Dam is on the Salt River, and it's down in the valley just below. I'll be heading there later today. But it's all about the views. So you're coming out of the high mountains, and it's almost all cliffside here. Everywhere there's a vista. And the road is very twisty as well, so it's a great motorcycle road. I do prefer going up over going down. For whatever reason, I find it more difficult going down. But no troubles with this road. And it's kind of a bit of a rough road. It's they've done that chip seal or something to the road, so it's not as good as it could be. But largely they've taken the potholes out, and it's relatively smooth. I didn't have any trouble with this road. Everywhere you look, you see mountains, peaks. There's lots of trees, and it's early in the morning. The sun's just risen up over the mountains, and everything's just looking gorgeous. Camping last night was enjoyable, but it was cold. I had to wear most of my gear in my sleeping bag just to stay warm. It was just above freezing. I had actually stopped earlier in the day, probably a couple hours back, and found a campsite, loved it, had a great view, set myself up, and no, I could tell it was way too windy. It was almost blowing my tent away, even with my stuff in it. So I knew it was going to get cold, it was going to be windy, not a good setup. So I packed up, kept going, and I'm glad I did. Sawmill Flats was just a fantastic campsite, and I had good camp neighbors. I met Casey. He was the first there. He had booked out a number of sites for friends and family that were coming for the long weekend, I think it was, for them. And a few of them showed up that night, but they were, nice and quiet. They had some young kids, young families, and they were having a good time, but they weren't loud. I was able to get to sleep, no problem whatsoever. Great compadres to have at a campsite. So yeah, this road, it just keeps going down and down and down, and the environment slowly is changing as well in the vegetation and whatnot, and you'll see that as we get around there. Look at this turn. Got to watch a little bit. You can see there's some stuff to look out for. Yeah, it's not super wide, but you can see here plenty of room for two vehicles to go by. Just got back from traveling in Europe, and everything seems wide compared to some of the roads I was traveling there. Some of them are single lane with vehicles going in both directions. You have to find pullouts occasionally. You have to back up just to get around. Another win for motorcycles, I suppose. So at this point, it looks like I'm getting, lower down. I thought maybe I'm getting close to the end. But in fact, it's not true at all. There's still a lot more coming up. One of the great things about this road is very little traffic, but particularly very few trucks. The other side, the side I came from, becomes a dirt road. So the only people you're going to get out here are people who really have a purpose, people that are out here for adventure, people who are out camping, fishing, hunting, that kind of thing. I really enjoy getting away and being able to ride at a reasonable pace. I never go that fast, but I like to go, at a pace that's good for a motorcycle, and traffic just gets in the way. So I've come out of the trees now mostly, and it's starting to get into like ranch land. The road is beat up, but passable. And you can see now the Salt River Reservoir. So the Roosevelt Dam was built around the turn of the century, around 1900. And the purpose of the dam was more for controlling the river. It had lots of overflows, overruns, and it would flood the area, and it's hard to live in an established pattern when that happened. So the dam was really built primarily to control the river flow. And so while it is a hydroelectric dam, it's not a particularly productive one, way less than, say, the Hoover Dam. At its time, it was one of the higher dams, but nowadays it's like half the size of the Hoover Dam again. So not an overly big dam these days, but it was an effective one. It allowed this area to be inhabited and claimed. Oh, I love this look here. You see the red rocks coming through? Absolutely beautiful. And just up ahead, those are campers, and they're out there on the cliffside in dispersed camping spots. It's just unbelievable what you can do out here in this country where there's so few people around. You can really get away from it all. Well, that's going to wrap up the trip for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment. Let me know other places you'd like me to ride.